All right, here we go. Hey, everyone. Behind the couch. It's another Saturday early evening. I am Dr. Shiloh of LA Not So Confidential, and I'm here with my wonderful best friend of so long now. So long. Esteemed forensic psychologist and co-host, Dr. Scott.
Esteemed? Wow.
Yeah, I think so. I think we can call you that. You were psychologist of the year for the county. Like, come on.
That's true.
That's true.
That's true. Yes. I didn't have to pay very much for it, so it's legit.
It was a pay to play.
Yeah, this is Dr. Scott. Welcome back, folks. We have a really, really cool. I mean, I don't necessarily know if we intended it to happen this way, that like our Get Vocals would include so many interviews with people, but that's kind of what's happening, and I love it.
Of our last 7 episodes, 6 have had guests. I mean, who do we think we are? Tim and Lance? Like, what is this? Come on.
Like we could even be Tim or Lance.
Yes, absolutely. Our network overlords who we will be getting to spend some time with in Vegas at CrimeCon. You can still use our code confidential for a 10% discount on your standard CrimeCon badges. And we have, I think we're going to go with three unique swag giveaways. We're just going to give you at CrimeCon. We're actually going to have them for all of the events and festivals we'll be at this year. But we just got our final draft or image back of our sticker that we designed for CrimeCon.
It's great.
And it's fantastic. It's Vegas themed. It's wonderful. Our wonderful graphic designer, Amber, did a beautiful job again. We're going to have some other really cool things for you guys. So the other events will be the True Crime Podcast Festival in August in Dallas, and then the Savannah Crime Expo in September, which our guest better be there as well. We'll ask him about that today. I also want to welcome new Patreon members. We have 4 new Patreon members since we saw you guys last. We have Maddie W, Victoria C, Leanne K, and Kayla J. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Every single time, every month when I send out mail to the new members, writing those postcards and telling them thank you is it's just such a reflective moment. And we appreciate you all so much. I know I did an announcement on the Patreon page and blog that we have there, but for our Australian and New Zealand members, we have your Patreon swag packs stacked up. We will send them as soon as it is feasible to. Because of COVID, they still have major lockdown on the mail situation. It's not that we can't get it there. It's just a package. Hang on.
Well, they also know that you completely cough into every one of those packages, and we don't know where you've been. So it could be just like Mary.
So COVID Mary. A package this size, super flat, is $100 to send to one of those places. So we can't do that right now. We would love to be able to, but
at some point we'll be able to.
When it goes back down to like $16 to get it to Australia, we will happily do so. So we are saving them, and they are coming. Gosh, I think that's it for new business. New business. What is this? A union meeting? On that note, thank you guys for being patient with us. We did not put out a brand new episode this last week. We put out our Vintage Hollywood Get Vocal live stream. And Scott and I needed a little bit of time off. I was working on a couple of really big trainings, and Scott is working on bargaining for his union, which is a full-time job in and of itself, but very important when you're doing union work. So we needed a little extra bandwidth for those things. You're doing good, Scott? You okay? You're muted, by the way. It's okay. Your mic fell down because you're muted. We just want to make sure you're holding it together all right. oh man, he just dropped off. Sorry, guys. Scott just keeled over in front of us. No, he's having some mic issues. So we will work on Emily. If this turns into a union work meeting, I'm out. No, I hear you, girl. I hear you. I have been on my union board for 2 years. It's important.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Great. Yeah, we are very pro-union. We won't turn this into a union meeting, but believe me, we are very pro-union, very, very important for the economy of this country. So that's my soapbox. Push it back under the desk and ready to go.
Push it back under. And would you like to introduce our guest?
I am going to do that. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to read what is incredibly impressive to me about our guest today. This is a wonderful intro that is sort of boiled down. We pulled from a lot of different areas, especially I was reading the one on Lou's Amazon page, which is amazing.
Yeah, Lou, you can jump on whenever you like.
And am I pronouncing this right? Valoze?
Valoze.
I gotta get that last accent in. Lou Valoze is a highly decorated federal agent who worked for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the ATF, U.S. Marshals, and the Immigration and Naturalization Service for 26 years. So he must have started when he was 5. He spent the last 2 decades of his career working in an undercover capacity for long-term, high-profile, and complex investigations of home invasion crews, outlaw motorcycle organizations, other organized crime groups, murder-for-hire schemes, and most notably, conducting storefront operations, which we're going to get more explanation on. Throughout Lou's career, he was deployed to various areas in the country to work in an undercover capacity to infiltrate criminal organizations. Lou is the only undercover agent in history to purchase over 1,000 crime guns during his career. Additionally, he once posed as a hitman in a murder-for-hire scheme where a doctor hired him to kill his wife and even provided Lou with the gun to commit the murder. Based on conversations Lou had with the doctor on his undercover cell phone, Congress was influenced to change the federal murder-for-hire statute as a direct result of the Supreme Court's decision in that case. Wow. Amazing. Lou currently resides in Savannah, Georgia with his family. I know he's already planning to take us to dinner when we come visit. And please welcome our friend, Lou Valoze, aka
Hi, Lou.
First, by the way, I don't know how this guy could be undercover. Like, you are literally a wall of a human being. Like,
the most obvious person in the room. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. How did you change your identity so many times? Seriously.
Well, luckily, I never ran into the same bad guy twice. Luckily.
That's the key.
Oh, okay.
It worked for me. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here tonight. Long time no see, because you were so gracious to actually speak at a training that I helped develop for our peer support program at the agency that I work for. And so Lou did a wonderful presentation talking about his career, as well as, you know, the struggles that come with that and how to best support your peers when you're working in law enforcement in some of these areas. And gosh, I was trying to think how long ago it was that we met you and Kevin and came on the End of Watch podcast. It's been a very long time, because it was pre-COVID, definitely.
It was pre my book.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
I plug in right there.
Oh, don't worry. We will be plugging that away.
I do want to ask, though, regarding the book, like, how long have you had this in the works?
5 years. Took me 5 years. Okay.
Yeah, sounds about right.
5 years and 5 co-authors. You know, but I finally found the right one, and he just made it. He made it. I hate this term, but a page turner. And man, I'm getting calls from all the men and women that I work with, even the ones who didn't like me, and they're just telling me that they love the book. It's an easy read. It's exciting. It's a fast read. And they all tell me it sounds like me talking, right? When they read the book, it's like they're talking to me, which is exactly what I wanted.
That's the best.
I didn't want to, it was so hard for me because I didn't want to, it's not a story about some tough guy, who rides off into the sunset on his Harley and all that. It's a real story about, professional success and personal failure and, trying to handle all that, along with all the crazy, insane stories of 2 decades of undercover work.
Yeah, I thought, we might start there. It makes sense to have you take us through your career trajectory and kind of lead us through a bit about what undercover work entails, but also the diversity of the work that you did, because it wasn't just, one type. But we're talking 25 years in law enforcement. So can you just tell us about your career journey?
Yeah, I graduated from college and I was just kind of clueless, and I had no direction. And I had a terrible GPA. I had a degree in economics and business and just no clue what I wanted to do. I took a job at a bank in New York, making like $8 or $9 an hour, reading computer printouts and putting them in boxes all day. And I got a call from a buddy who, he was down in the Bronx at his brother's apartment. And he goes, "Hey man, why don't you come over after work?" So I did. And his brother pulled up. I had never met his brother. And he was driving a Corvette. He had the long hair. He had the cool look. It was, kind of Miami Vice days back then. And he was a DEA agent, and he was working undercover. And he talked to me about his job. We drank a beer for about 30 minutes. And that's when I was hooked, man. That's when I found my direction. I knew what I wanted to do. So I started putting in all the federal agencies. And, realistically, you don't just start working undercover, right?
Right, of course.
Realistically, you don't just become a Fed either. You have to pay your dues. There's requirements. The only good thing was that I was still in test taking mode because I was fresh out of college. I was 22 years old. Mm-hmm. And I scored really high on a couple of the tests. And INS, which is now ICE, called me for an interview. I didn't even own a suit. So my dad helped me. We went down to the garment district in New York and bought a cheap suit. And from some guy, Chinese guy, didn't even speak English. And I got an airplane ticket. I flew out to LA for the interview and, tucked my mullet in the back of my collar and went in. And, I did really good in the interview because I didn't know what I was doing. Sometimes when you're totally clueless, you do better.
Right? Sure.
So
they know they can mold you if you're not a know-it-all.
Which is basically how I worked undercover my whole career. That's how I went in when I went in undercover. Like, hey man, teach me.
Yeah.
So about a week later, I get a call offering me a job in LA. I'm an East Coast guy, New York guy, and I didn't know anything. I remember looking, and I was starting out as a GS5, and the pay back then was $19,000. And my father was like, "So you're going to go to Los Angeles, and you're going to live on $19,000 a year." I said, "It looks that way, right?"
Oh my gosh.
I tell you, and I didn't know anything about immigration or I had never even held a gun in my life, right? Growing up in New York. And so I got to the academy and, it was crazy. Immigration law is very complex, very convoluted, but I loved it. And, I went to LA and man, I got thrown out on the streets. It was a weird dynamic in LA. It was the greatest time ever to be law enforcement was the early 90s in Los Angeles. If you wanted action, that's where you wanted to be. Of any place in the world, Los Angeles in the early 90s was the greatest time to be a cop. So, they threw me right in because it was kind of a strange dynamic. The younger guys, we all wanted to be on task forces out in the street. And, a lot of the older men and women, they wanted to be behind the desk. So, we all raised our hands. And I was thrown like on these task forces and anti-smuggling unit. That's when I really got exposed to gang life. These South American and Central American gangs, they were coming into LA. MS-13, we were already working them back in the early 90s when people hadn't even heard of them yet. but they were coming in and they were showing that, our American, they were showing a whole new level of violence, right? And just a lack of humanity. And
oh yeah, I think when people think of immigration type of law enforcement, you don't necessarily think off the top all of the overlap of the violence, of the criminal organizations, of the drug smuggling, like all of you're doing the jobs of like 4 different agencies.
Well, what was awesome was that we were kind of, respect-wise, maybe toward the bottom rung of the ladder, but we were so valuable to everybody. Every other reason being was that, at that time, probably 90% of the real violent crime was being conducted by foreign-born nationals with the gangs. And, we could come in and slap a detainer on a guy just for being out of status.
True.
And you can use that as leverage. So LAPD, all the other federal agencies, they love to have an INS guy on their task force.
Yeah, it buys them time to be able to do their investigation, right?
Absolutely. We came in handy.
Sure.
We were doing back then, immigration wasn't sexy back then, and it wasn't like it has been recently. It wasn't important with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we were making these incredible cases on these smuggling operations, human trafficking organizations, and you'd bring them to federal court. You'd have to fight just to get them in court, and then these smugglers were getting 18 months, human trafficking. The statutes had no teeth back then at all, right. Which is a little bit demoralizing, when you're the agent who's done all the work. So anyway, I ended up on an ATF LAPD INS task force in Rampart. And we were just hitting the streets, corner jump outs. It was the greatest. My partners were LAPD, just learning how to be a real cop. Just police work every night. And that's when I first saw, when I started working with the ATF guys, I was like, these are the cowboys. These are the guys who are doing all the undercover. They're always in the mix. Every shootout, there's always ATF right in the middle of it. They're working on the worst of the worst bad guys. And I knew eventually I wanted to migrate over,
So, and you're right. I mean, I actually got to work with some ATF agents recently at their crisis negotiation training, and they are, first of all, they all seem very young, which I'm just realizing that I'm just getting older, but they are top notch. Like it's like they study this stuff. They know that they might not use it twice a week like an LAPD or an LA Sheriff's Department will, but when it does happen, it's going to be big. It's going to be serious. And so they are studying up and they're good at their craft. So I can imagine in all these other ways they are as well.
I mean, they're using it. Our SRT guys are the best, as far as I'm concerned, best in the country. You always hear about that other agency who's, I'll just say their initials because I don't like them, the FBI. But, their HRT, their guys, they might do like 1 or 2 operations, in a 6-month period. Our guys, we're banging out, we're doing home invasion cases, organized crime, bikers, street gangs. These guys, they're executing warrants weekly.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
And they're top notch, man. They covered my ass for decades.
So tell us about the progression into UC work and what were some of the cases you work? What were some of the infiltration of different organizations that you did?
Yeah, so it was very textbook. I did a short stint with the U.S. Marshals in New York for 2 years. And then I went to Puerto Rico on a fugitive task force, and that's when ATF finally opened up. ATF being a small agency, especially back in the 90s, they didn't open up very often. They finally opened up, very 24-person class. I was able to get in, I got hired, and man, my partner, I was very lucky. I put in for Miami, New York, and LA. And being a Spanish speaker, I figured I was guaranteed one of those 3 cities, and they offered me a job in Savannah, Georgia. And,
you're like, what?
Yeah. But, it really worked out because my first partner was an undercover guy. He was just a legendary undercover guy who I would love you guys to talk to because he has a lot of mental issues. And he's the chief of police now in South Carolina. But he brought me right in. Before I even went to the ATF Academy, I was working undercover, literally days on the job, and I was out in alleyways buying guns. So I started with the very basics. I would, through an informant, I would meet a convicted felon, in the bathroom of a fast food restaurant to buy a stolen gun. Those were the types of undercover. That's how I got, my feet wet working undercover. And, those are really, when you think about it, those are the important ones because those are the trigger pullers and those are the guns that are killing people. So, it might be, I might buy a little bit of dope and then buy a gun. We might meet at a car wash in an alleyway, in a parking lot. And those are really the most dangerous. That's next to a uniform officer responding, to a domestic violence. I think the second most dangerous thing for a law enforcement officer is to meet a bad guy like in a parking lot or in an alleyway to conduct a gun buy.
Yeah.
Because they kill each other all the time, and the danger is not so much that he's going to think you're a cop or a fed. The danger is that maybe he knows you're showing up with $1,000 and he's just going to kill you and take. They do it to each other all the time.
Yeah.
So that's how I got my feet wet with these small gun buys, small dope buys, kind of getting into these street gangs, working around, his name was Randy Beach, kind of following Randy around, and then slowly but surely working into organizations, kind of from the outside, letting them know that you were a money guy, you were a hustler. That's how I started developing my undercover persona. And, I ended up doing infiltrations throughout my career, but like we kind of touched on earlier, my first big time one was a biker one. It was the Outlaws Motorcycle Gang. And they're a big, bad, violent gang. And I knew nothing. The only reason I got picked, it was an Atlanta case, and the ATF undercover, he was working it with a task force officer who was he was with a sheriff's department. He was deputized and he was an ATF task force officer. And as soon as the Outlaws invited them to go down to Bike Week in Daytona with them and go on the run with them, his sheriff's department was like, listen, we didn't sign up for all this. It's getting a little too deep. And they pulled him out. And my partner, he needed someone. I was the only other agent in Atlanta at the time who had a motorcycle license. On my undercover license, because I had like a Yamaha when I was 18 in New York, right? I knew nothing about Harleys. I'd never ridden anything like that. And I remember calling my buddy in New York as I'm driving to Atlanta and asking him like, hey, on a Harley, is it like one down and four up when you shift? That's how
man.
So
yeah, you better get that straight before you get out there.
Oh my God, they gave me this huge bike, like this seized chopper, and the first night, and it was like raining out, and we were in the North Georgia mountains, and I dumped it. Like they were all, and the informants were there, and they were like, "We're gonna bring this guy, we're bringing this guy to the clubhouse."
This is who you sent us,
right? That's exactly, and they weren't quiet about it. Like,
sure.
So the first thing when they brought me into the clubhouse, which is very intimidating, I don't know. Dr. Scott, you've probably never been in a outlaw motorcycle gang clubhouse. I'm going to venture to guess. Shiloh.
That he wants to admit to.
Yeah.
No, but I've been in some bars that have been trying to look like one of those. So back in the day. But the real thing, no, I mean,
they're scary, man. They're intimidating.
Oh, terrifying.
Yeah. And, I'm coming in this just knowing nothing. So what I did right off the bat, I went right to the president, my first night there. And I said, listen, his name was Pierre. I said, none of them use real names. I said, listen, I introduced myself, and I said, I'm with so-and-so, our informant, because it was a big deal just to get in there. And I said, listen, I don't know your culture. I don't know your rules. And I don't want to offend anybody. I said, I just want to learn. I want to be one of you, and I want to learn how. So, teach me. And, these guys all have huge egos, man.
So smart.
So
yeah.
He saw this big dude, young, who he could shape, and they loved it. And that's how I played. And that's how I played a lot during my career. I didn't go in there like some kind of Noah, because if I had tried to go in there as an outlaw biker, if I watched a few movies and read a book and tried to, they would have seen right through that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I did that through my career.
Let me make sure. I want to put a pin in that because make sure I understood what you did. Were you taught, instructed by someone in, hey, these guys have big egos. You have to appeal to their ego, or did you have an innate sense of that yourself and to do it?
No, I figured that, man. Just after watching these guys for a few minutes,
okay,
I could see they all do, and because they're big shots, right? In their world, man. Like they go into a bar and the seas.
They're gods. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I never tried to. I was just Sal Nunziata with a hustle. That's who I was. Like if I was working on a certain Kings or whoever, I wasn't going to try to be one of them because, most bad guys are really smart. The ones who do it for a living and for a long time, they're very smart and they see through bullshit. Yeah, absolutely, man. They see right through bullshit. So in all of my infiltrations, I didn't try to be someone who I wasn't. I stuck to really kind of the guy I grew up as and just kind of put it out there. And listen, this is my hustle. If you want to be a part of it, come join me. Right.
So you're kind of the side guy. You're there in the background. You don't want the spotlight shining on you.
No.
But it sounds like, also you're touching on like how you develop your character, if you will, is going to something and does that help you sort of keep it straight and more believable? Is that sort of the idea behind that?
Without question. And all the great ones that I watched, the guys who influenced me, Chris Bayless, Jay Dobbins, I got to work with all those guys and I watched them and how they did it. And they stayed very close to who they were in their undercover persona. And I said, listen, they're onto something here, right? Because I'm not, if I'm working on, the Aryan Nation or, neo-Nazis or that kind of group, I'm a big Italian guy from New York, right? They don't exactly welcome that, right?
Yeah,
Catholic.
right.
So I got crosses all over tattooed on me. So they do want to hustle. They all want to make money. That's the one thing all bad guys share. Really, like the ideology kind of goes out the window when you really get to know these guys. Like there's very few groups, whether it was the mafia, these supposed white supremacists, the black gangs, the Hispanic gangs, really it all went, they're, what you think are their beliefs went out the window. It's all about money with all these
Absolutely.
guys.
Yeah.
So if you can show that you have a hustle that can make them money and you're not a jerk off, you can infiltrate them. So that was my style of infiltration. I wasn't trying to become one of them. I was just wanting to make them part of my hustle, because I have to gather evidence for a prosecution, right? You can infiltrate a motorcycle gang and get your patch and all that and do it for 3 years. But if you don't gather evidence, you just join a motorcycle gang, right? The idea is we're not investigating. We're not allowed to investigate a group because they're a group. Okay, I couldn't just go to my boss and say, "Oh, there's a Hell's Angels chapter in town. I'm going to open up an investigation."
Right.
Because he's going to say no. If there are credible allegations, of federal violations, then you can initiate an investigation. But we can't investigate the Latin Kings because they're the Latin Kings.
Got it. So at this point, where you kind of brought us up to maybe before sort of the era of the storefront operations, do you have a family at this time? Are you do you have roots anywhere? No?
Yeah, I had met my wife, and I think we we had just, by the time we got married, man, I was bouncing all over the country, man. I was on the West Coast, East Coast. And I started doing very different. I really didn't like the biker thing. I did two of them. I did a Hells Angels one out in San Diego, El Cajon, not really San Diego. And the Outlaws one in Atlanta, but that wasn't my thing. I saw that it was a lot of work and a lot of time for what I considered to be very little reward.
Got it.
And the other thing, I always felt about those biker things is, if you went around the country and asked every chief of police and every sheriff, what's the biggest problem in your jurisdiction? Not one of them's going to say outlaw bikers.
No.
It's the trigger pullers on the street. And that's who I always tried to focus on. So I did everything. I did every kind of gang infiltration. I was just doing murder for hire. I did some mafia stuff. Anything that I never said no. Anytime, once you get that reputation in the agency, you get a lot of phone calls. Hey, I need an undercover. Yes, I didn't even need to hear what it was. I'll do it. I'm off to Chicago or wherever. And but that's how you get good. You keep doing it, and that's how you get good. Now the smart guys, they get a good 5-6 year run, and they go do something else. The dumb guys like me, we get addicted to it. And we keep doing it. The positive to that is, after 5 or 6 years, like you've really honed your craft, right? And now you're really hitting on all cylinders. So if you get out, you're kind of wasting all that, all that experience and talent. But, if you stay in like I did, then you got the outside forces,
So can you say more about getting addicted to it? What's that like? And what do you mean by that?
I can say just like probably like heroin or crack or any drug like that, I was addicted after my first undercover deal in 1998. I was addicted. I got that high. I get so many people ask me, were you scared? Weren't you scared? I was never scared because I was doing what I love. And I was excited. So once I started, I couldn't stop. And all I cared about before the end of that case was the next case. I rolled into cases from one case to the next. And we had almost a competition, in the undercover program and all the guys and girls who did it. You would hear, that, this guy out in Chicago just did a big gang case, locked up 40 guys and 100 guns and, 100 kilos or whatever. And you'd be happy, right? Because that was your teammate. But deep down, you'd be like, oh, I could do better than that. I'm going to do that, and it was a competition almost.
Chasing the next high.
Into the addiction. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it sounds like your motivation is being fed by that. What's the next high or what's the next challenge? Is there a support system for you that you were utilizing, or what was your circle of friends like? Like everything gets a little muddy like that.
Well, there was no official support system. The men and women that I worked undercover with, we all kept it together. But it was, looking back on it, it was probably like a bunch of alcoholics meeting up in a bar, right?
Right.
It was because I don't know if it was really healthy. But, I didn't lose because I've gotten them back. But, my outside friends, friends I grew up with, I just lost all touch with, family, all that. There wasn't time for that. I wanted to be invisible in my personal life. All I cared about was Sal Nunziato and the next case I was going to make. And again, with great results. I had great results professionally. I was taking crime guns off the street, guns that were used in robberies and murders. I was buying them from bad guys and taking them off the street. So the way I saw it, I was saving lives, taking crime guns off the street. So I need to keep doing it and keep doing more of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your new book that's out is called Storefront Sting, an ATF agent's life undercover. Can you tell us what a storefront operation is? And I would like to know, I'm sure this speaks to the time period, but why was it so controversial?
A storefront operation is an long-term undercover operation where a fictitious business is established, and this business by law enforcement, by the government. And we would immerse ourselves into the community, the criminal element of that community, with the goal of identifying the gangs, buying guns, buying drugs, and locking up the worst of the worst in that community. And we didn't just open these up anywhere. They were strategically placed where they were requested, usually by local chiefs of police. These cities that all of a sudden they were like, we've got home invasions, we've got national gangs, armed robberies, drug, just unchecked gun violence, and they would say, "Hey, can you help?" And we would set up these storefronts, and they were incredibly successful.
So what kind of businesses would they be?
So I did 4 myself, and I also went around the country as a subject matter expert and helped on about 15 to 20 others. The 4 I did was I did a tattoo shop. Then we did a head shop, kind of a paraphernalia store. Then we did a military surplus store with an attached shooting range.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, we kept getting bigger and bigger as we went along and better. And the last
what a great idea, though.
Yeah, ATF wasn't crazy about that idea. The last one we did, I was actually a freight forwarder. We were on the port, and we had a freight forwarding business, exporting goods to Colombia, all sorts of stuff. So, as you can imagine, the work that went into these was just incredible, right? You had to really, all these businesses, we really ran these businesses. So I had to establish these businesses as Sal Nunziato from scratch. You couldn't pull favors and pull licenses, because for operational security, man, you had to do everything from scratch. So Sal Nunziato was going out there, applying for business licenses, meeting with realtors, looking at commercial real estate, signing leases, dealing with the fire marshal, dealing with code enforcement, and then you had the secret set up, and you had to sneak in your techs and line the counters with ballistic material and hidden cameras, hidden microphones, just very labor intensive, a lot of work just to get up and running, right? All this.
My goodness. Good thing you had a degree in economics and business.
Yeah, thank God, right? Well, none of them made any money. They all would have failed in the real world. I
bet.
But they evolved. We really did evolve. And we went from the tattoo shop, which was insane, and it was a blast, by the way. But
can't even imagine.
We were really doing street level. We were doing street gangs in that. And great work. We bought 430 crime guns.
Wow.
In Augusta, Georgia, in 12 months.
Oof.
But very street level. We dismantled gangs, but we were charging gangs with RICO statutes, so they were getting huge sentences. But we kept raising the level. Especially we got to the military surplus store with the shooting range. We started getting into organized crime. We started getting into, we had counterfeiters, gun traffickers, and then by that last one, we had elevated our game to the point where we were driving Jaguars and BMWs and dealing with high-level criminals who, if you walked in that place, it was a huge, 20,000-foot warehouse area with beautiful offices, with stuff from all over the world, like real freight forwarders would have, forklifts going. And, we got into Bolivian gun smugglers and just incredible stuff.
Wow. So go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was just going to, the level of complexity of all that goes into setting this up, is that still a viable approach today? And could someone trying to do what you did back then in today's world, is it it just seems like it would be harder with access to the internet and background checks. Is it a different world now than it was then?
Yes, and there are none being done right now. But if you're asking me if I could pull another one off, I know I could. But it would be much more difficult because of those reasons you just said. It would be more difficult, but it could still be done. They kind of, Congress got sideways with these. Mistakes were made. And, we started maybe some offices started these operations and there wasn't enough experience because it kind of sounds simple, right? We'll open up a fake business and we'll put the word out that we're buying guns and drugs, but it's very complex in reality. And I think some offices opened some up and didn't have the experience as far as, the case agents running it and the undercovers. And some mistakes were made. And I'm not saying I didn't make mistakes because I did, but operational mistakes were made, but they were blown out of proportion. First of all, Dr. Scott, you can't show me a long-term undercover operation, that you couldn't Monday morning quarterback and say, why'd you do this? Why'd you do this? Mistakes are always made. Undercover work is a gray area, right? If you go home alive, you're successful. Mm-hmm. So a couple of reporters jumped on these. It was up in Milwaukee, and I wasn't familiar with the agents who had done this. But there was a couple of things these reporters jumped on. I think they stiffed the landlord on payments maybe after some damage was done to the place. And a gun got stolen from a cover team guy's car. And again, that happens, man.
Yeah.
That happens. But these reporters got onto it, and they got onto it, and Congress started looking into like 6 storefronts happening around the country. None of them were mine. And they started picking them apart.
So kind of just painting the picture that these are just like cowboys kind of doing whatever irresponsibly. Was there also an element of, which I know there's legalities through this that you can very definitively look at and say whether it's entrapment or not. But I think the general public starts to say, oh my gosh, like this feels like an entrapment sort of situation. And sometimes that just doesn't go over well, sort of,
because it's a surface understanding of the work that they're trying to do. It's a very superficial understanding.
That's a great point. So there's no legal entrapment issue because, but so it's very hard to say, like when I have video of you coming into my storefront, driving your car to my storefront, coming in, pulling guns out of your waistband and selling them to me, it's very hard to claim entrapment, right?
Yes.
Right? I'm there. You're coming to me. Yes. However, the communities themselves, even though we were making them safer, members of the communities, I think, felt burned. Like, because in a lot of these, we develop relationships with good people who are just coming in to buy cigarettes, to get a tattoo, to buy T-shirts or CDs or whatever. And those people felt burned.
Sure.
They've been lied to, right? They've been tricked by the government. So there was that, betrayal. There you go. There was that sense, which kind of made them unpopular. And of course, there's always more than one way to look at it. Listen, we just took 400 guns off your streets, and we took off the worst guys that were preying on your community. But, such is law enforcement, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the elements that I did not even consider when I think about UC work that I heard you speak about last week was when you guys actually took a member of the community and he actually worked at the store for you guys. Like it was a gamble, right? But he was someone that would make you look more legit, like tighten up those ties with the community. And you talked about what it was like when you had to go in and arrest everyone. And that you couldn't even actually be there because you had built such a relationship with this person that was a good person.
It was awful, yeah.
I can't imagine.
It was just a huge mistake, We had already bought, this was back when the statutes for crack cocaine were brutal.
Oh, God.
And I think in my first meet with him, I bought like 5 ounces or something. He was already a multi-convicted felon, so he was done. Just with that, he was done.
Yeah.
So, his girlfriend came to us. He was on parole, and she said he really needs a job as a condition of his parole. Can he work here? And we were like, instant street cred. It was the operation was kind of a little bit of a slow start, and we were new to the community. With one of their own, with a guy from the community behind the counter, instant credibility. So, we weighed the pros and cons. We're like, yeah, let's do it. And he was with us every day for the rest of the operation. And what a terrible mistake. We just grew to like him so much, man, and get to know him as a person, and hanging with him every day. The big downside for us is that we could never go out of roll all day.
Right.
We could not come out of roll. We had guys right behind the wall, in a cover room who had to be extra quiet.
Oh, wow.
So, but he ended up, and I say this in my book, and I'll say it again. He would have jumped in front of a bullet for me before a lot of people in my office would have. He did, in fact, thwart 2 armed robberies. There were 2 armed robberies that were about to happen. Guys we had already dealt with, guys we had bought guns and drugs from, who knew we had cash, on premises, who came back later in the night to rob us.
Wow.
Ski mask, the whole deal. And he literally jumped in between us and them. He knew who they were, and talked them down on 2 occasions. We were getting our guns out. We were like, all right, it's go time.
Yeah.
This operation's over. We're going to have a shootout.
Yeah.
And he saved it. So he saved the operation, saved us from potential harm. And as the months went by, and he became a negotiator for us. He saw what was going on, and because of his background, he was okay with it. He considered us his friends, and he started helping us negotiate. A guy would come in and want some ridiculous price for a gun, and we wouldn't be willing to pay it. And he would like the manager at a car dealership. He would have him come in and talk the guy down. And he helped us identify people, unwittingly, but, a guy would come in, give some street name. We wouldn't know who he was. He'd say, oh, that's so-and-so. He lives over there. And we're like, oh, thank you. So by the end of the operation, after spending all this time with him, shooting pool with him, talking about life, talking about problems, we all started looking at each other saying, he's going to prison for 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
It's like part of the operation.
Wow.
It feels like part of the team. Mm-hmm. Then it all kind of culminated toward the end. One day we're playing pool, hanging out, and he looks at us, and he says, I got to tell you guys something, man. He goes, you guys are the first white people I've ever trusted in my life. And, when he said that, yeah, my heart dropped into my stomach, man. My partner's same thing.
Yeah.
And even the guys in the cover room were tearing up, man. And we tried to get the federal prosecutors to not charge him, but there was no way. I mean, the ball was rolling. There was no stopping it. So we did decide to arrest him before everyone else. He was arrested the day before. And he did try to commit suicide in the cell, tried to hang himself unsuccessfully, thankfully. And then, another mistake, he was placed in the same lockup, same jail as all the other defendants. So now all these guys, 90 other guys are getting arrested, and they're finding out that we're undercovers and this was all.
Oh, man.
And they see.
They're assuming he was part of it.
They're thinking he's an informant, obviously, right?
Sure.
So, yeah, he's not going to be very popular in the lockup.
Right.
Just mistakes, a lot of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I did have to court. I went to court to actually try and get him a reduction in his sentence. And I pleaded my case to this old federal judge who was actually from the city where this operation happened. There's a highway named after him. And, man, he didn't want to hear a word I had to say. He looked at me after I went through my whole spiel about how much this guy had helped us. And he said, listen, he didn't help you because you're a law enforcement officer. He helped you because he thought you were a gangster, just like he is. And he threw the book at him.
Well, I mean, but you had to. Like, what else can you do but go in there and try to correct it a smidge, you
A
know?
little bit.
But God, that must have been just brutal.
I think this is when I was thinking about questions I might have the opportunity to ask you. You actually already went there, because one of them that came up for me was the idea that there are so many striated layers of in our country regarding crime and the gray areas of crime and non-crime that most of us just get to walk around with, and we're completely oblivious to it.
Mhm.
We are completely oblivious. We might walk 2 blocks off our normal path and see a head shop and not have any idea that there is a lot of activity going on around there. And I thank you for, I think this is a cold, hard, like, dose of reality to a lot of people, even our listeners that are into true crime, to realize that this is all real. You know, we can kind of put an entertainment value on it for listening pleasure, but at the end of the day, this involves real people, real emotions. And I get where that judge was coming from. I mean, on one level, I can get it. On the other, there is more to it. This person trusted you, and this is the world in which he lives, right?
Sure.
So that's lived, and that's where he was allowed to thrive and be successful. And I would even dare to say, care for you guys. Like, there's a real relationship that was there. Yeah, I'm kind of overwhelmed by your sharing today. Thank you so much for this. It's really getting me to think about it on a completely different level. But
Yeah,
tell us more about, I mean, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I also want to know about what your idea of the mission behind this book is. I mean, obviously you got a great story to tell, but what's behind that for you?
So what I do in the book is I lay out, because, you know, storefront operations are really not known by the public. You know, we didn't do press releases because we wanted to keep the technique a secret. So, you know, although some people know what they were because LAPD and NYPD were doing some back in the 60s and 70s, but that was mostly like pawn shops to try and disrupt, you know, fencing operations. Now, we took these things to a whole nother level. And the book is based around these 4 storefront operations that I did and the evolution of them, how each one got bigger and better. And I mean, there's just wild, as you can imagine, you know, you're running this business for a year and you're opening your doors basically to the worst criminals in that city. So there were gang fights. I mean, just all out fisticuffs, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like shit flying all over the place, and we'd have to come out with baseball bats. I mean, there was just crazy things happened in there. And I lay all that out, you know, while I'm talking about these different operations and what went on with them, and the insanity, you know, the tattoo shop, the crazy stories that happened there. But what's underlying in the book is, you know, kind of what was going on with me the whole time, that I was running myself into the ground, and not knowing it, believing my own bullshit. And, you know, by the last operation, you know, I'll say this, I was getting showered at that point with awards. ATF had never seen, you know, an operation that brings in 400 crime guns off the street. They had never seen, you know, the results like this. So I was getting accolades. I was getting showered with awards. I don't know if you're familiar with Project Safe Neighborhood, PSN. You know, I won PSN. It's a Justice Department program that helps fund these kinds of operations. I got PSN Gang Investigation of the Year, PSN Gun Crime Investigation of the Year, OCDF Case of the Year, Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force.
Wow, that's huge.
U.S. Attorney's Office Agent of the Year. But you know what awards I wasn't getting? Father of the Year, Husband of the Year, Friend of the Year. You know, I wasn't. Those were awards I wasn't getting, and I didn't. That wasn't my priority at that point. So the book kind of goes in 2 ways. You know, talking about the operations and then talking about kind of what I turned into. You know, like how I became a lot more Sal Nunziato than I was Louis Valoze. And, when that happens, it's going to end bad. And it did.
Yeah. Well, and that was the beauty of the End of Watch podcast, is that between you and Kevin, and I want to hear a little bit about, how you guys ended up doing the show together, but it's such a raw, no bullshit look at how wonderful and sexy this job can be. And it can be the most fun time ever, but something's got to give, because you can't be Agent of the Year and Father of the Year at the same time. Something's going to give if you're doing it too long. And you guys certainly took it right up to that line. And I'm so glad you guys are both alive and not in prison yourselves, things like that, all those bad things that we know that happen to people who cross that line. And it's just a wonderful exploration of that with all the guests that you have on, and now helping chip away at the stigma of talking about mental health with law enforcement and military, because it is better, but I think clearly we have a long way to go. But I love sort of the grassroots way in which law enforcement officers like yourselves have said, okay, stuff is not moving fast enough. Let's make our own platform to talk about this with other people who are starting to think this way as well. So can you talk a little bit about the show and how you know Kevin, because you guys work together, right?
Yeah, we don't, we haven't done it in over a year.
That's okay.
Because of the book, and I've been doing all that. So Kevin he was just a great cop. I call him Bootsy. Call him Kevin, so weird. But
Bootsy. Sal.
Yeah, he became, he was a task force guy, and he actually did the storefront that I was talking about where we hired the guy. He was a huge part of that. He was in the cover room the whole time. And then he went on to become a homicide detective, and he was just a good cop. When the bad guys give you your nickname, he got Bootsy from them. That means they respect you.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
When you get your name off the street, when you're a cop, they respect you. They don't give nicknames to the ones they don't respect.
True.
So Kevin was doing the same thing I was, just he wasn't working undercover, but he was just burning it at both ends. And, he was a drinker. The guy drank more Jameson than any human being I've ever seen in my life. And, it ended badly for him with an accident and a DUI. And right about the same time, I'll use the word crashed, even though I didn't. Right about the same time my career crashed, that happened to him, and we kind of went through it together, and helped each other out during that. He's the one who told me to write a book. He's like, "Man, you got to write a book. You got to talk about these things." I think he was kind of telling me to do it in a therapeutic way.
Sure.
And then he wrote one. He was like, "Well, I'll write one," and he did, about his ordeal. And how he felt he was treated. So, we kind of had that in common. And I will tell you one theme, that we had in our podcast, and I feel very strongly about, especially for law enforcement, all law enforcement, especially for undercover work, is that there has to be a combination of your peers, peer support, and professionals like yourselves. Because I can tell you right now, and I'm telling you this from personal experience, just your buddies alone, that's not happening. Okay, I didn't do to get out of my funk, to clear up, to recover, until I saw a professional. And it took years of seeing a professional. So the peer support is important from your colleagues, but
sure.
Your colleagues don't know how to interpret things, not like you guys do, not like professionals. I didn't realize it until I went to a psychiatrist she knew how to interpret what was going on and explain things to me. Why am I feeling this way? And, why did these things affect me in the way they did? I'm not getting that from, the guy I worked undercover with.
Of course not. And that's why it's like any social support system. You need a variety to it to get different perspectives. You're going to have the people that are your cheerleaders and are going to blow smoke up your ass and tell you everything's fine. You're doing it great. But you also need someone to sit back and go, let me give you the cold, hard truth about this.
Yeah.
Or let me interpret it from my perspective or my profession to help you make sense of it, to understand how you actually have the power to change a lot of this.
There's also that space that gets created that I think is really great in my experience, you know, starting with law enforcement counseling, when start off with this attitude of, I don't really know why you're here. I don't know what I can get from you because you don't know what I've been through. You have not lived this life. And then about 3 sessions in, they realize they're in a space where they're not being judged, and they don't have to compete. Like, they don't have to say the right thing so that they're not dissed by a peer, or their fear of being dissed by a peer, because usually that wouldn't happen anyway. But that's when you can start to see the cracks. Like, you can see things start to open up where you can really do some good work, is where it's like, great, I've got breathing space with somebody here that at least knows the vocabulary. I don't have to be Sal to them. I have to be Lou. Yeah.
So what's next for you, Lou? I understand the book has been turned into a documentary.
Yeah, so I have a documentary that's out right now in film festivals. It's won 6 or 7 already. It won the Vegas Movie Awards. It's called Storefront Statesboro Blues. It's about the one that I talked. It's mostly about Petey, the guy I talked about.
Okay.
It's like a 25-minute documentary short. We've already started filming the next one, which is about a murder for hire that I did, where we actually interview the intended victim. We found her. It was a doctor who hired me to kill his wife, and they got us on camera together. I spent a whole day with her, man. It was crazy.
Wow.
A lot of feelings, you know. So I have that. Those are the documentaries. My book was optioned for a like Netflix type series, with the idea of making each storefront, you know, a season, each different storefront, and I think it's perfect for like a Netflix series by a big Hollywood company, and
very exciting.
Yeah, nothing happens fast in that world, I've learned. But,
no.
Yeah. So
you thought writing a book was slow?
Oh
Wait
my
for
Lord,
that.
people are slow. And they're, you know, I've learned this. Don't bug them either. Don't like email them.
Right.
Every week, because they don't like that.
And you're going to play yourself, clearly, right?
No, I'm not looking for fame. I'm just looking for a little fortune. Right?
Got it. I hear you.
But you know, the deal that I have is that I'll be an on-set consultant / producer. Of course. So I'll be involved in all of it.
Good, as you should be.
Yeah, which would be fun and would be a nice paycheck.
It's very exciting. Well, I think, you know, to sort of close out, you know, Bootsy told you to write this book. Like, you think he was coming from a place of it being therapeutic. Do you think it was? And or also, you know, doing the show, the podcast, does it feel therapeutic to lift all of that stuff off of you and out onto paper?
You know, I tell you, it did, because, you know, the main part of the book that I wrote was when I was still weekly seeing my doctor. Mm-hmm. And I think she's what helped me, you know, to open up, because it is so hard to write about your own fuck ups, your own mistakes. It's hard to put it on paper, man. Especially when I think, wow, you know, everyone I know is going to read this. It's embarrassing. But
you worry about bringing shame to yourself, and shame to your family, and shame to the people that you care about, and that's a difficult burden to bear. So how some of the greatest stories are ever told, and how the greatest connections are ever made, because people will see you being raw and authentic, and it gives them permission to deal with their own demons. So yeah, that is not an easy challenge right there.
Yeah, man, I couldn't have said that better myself. I couldn't have said that probably, but she, that therapy was really the reason why I think I'm getting such good reviews on my book, because I wasn't ready to be so open. I had lived my whole life kind of a secret, right? My personal life, I didn't have a lot of friends or outside of work, and so it was hard for me, but it was therapy that allowed me to open up. And man, it's a huge weight that just comes right off you. It really is. Yeah.
Well, you guys can see the link to Lou's book right there in the chat. You can grab it right on Amazon. We are so thrilled for your success, and that's what the cover looks like behind him. From the moment, we got introduced to you through Jason, we just knew you were our kind of people. We are so happy for what you're doing with your story. Cannot wait to see what's coming up, and hopefully we get to cross paths in Vegas at the end of April, because I know you will be there for another event. So we definitely, I'm going to bring my copy of the book so you can sign it for me.
Awesome.
Same here. Yeah.
and I'll definitely see you guys in Savannah as well, right? Because you guys.
Yes,
absolutely.
Right.
We'll be there.
And
yes.
Listen, so if the Netflix deal gets signed, then I got to come back on so we can talk about that.
Of course, you might need
absolutely
psychological consultants on the show too. I mean, who knows?
You guys are first on my list. All right.
Well, thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
everyone go out and grab the book. Like he said, it is a page turner, because it is story after story, but there's a lot of depth there as well. So, and download End of Watch, because there's a ton of episodes to go back and listen to, including a couple with us. So Thank you, Lou. You take care, and everyone else have a great Saturday evening, and good night.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Lou.